Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. Here on Iron Radio, this is Phil Stevens. I am a powerlifter, Highland Games athlete, strength coach, and youth football coach.
Hey, is Dr. Mike Nelson, Associate Professor of the Carrick Institute and creator of the Physiologic Flexibility Certification, which is open now September 18th through the 25th. Go to physiologicflexibility.com.
This is Coach Durrell, strength guild lifting in Kansas City. Back this week from, I had a lot of lifter wrangling to do last week, so I had to miss, but we back at it.
Cool. And this is Lonnie Lowry. I'm a former competitive bodybuilder, professor and consultant, that kind of thing. You know what? I actually have a couple of comments here I pulled off of YouTube. Just thought I would read these to you guys just a couple days ago. Xander the Pro, he commented. He said, I love the idea of a caveman Phil excitedly hopping up and down when he realizes he found a field of potatoes, only to become despondent when he digs one up and it's the wrong color or something like and then Peter says, I'm glad I found you guys here. It's like being reintroduced to old friends. Great show. Thanks. So just a nice little comment from Peter. Anyway, thanks for that, you guys. It's nice to see, some of these comments start to come in. All right. I thought, just based on something that came up this week, there's been two things that are all over my desk this week. One is caffeine, and the other is muscle quality. So I thought we could talk about the latter here. When we're young, we're all about muscle mass, I would argue. I don't know if young people really worry about the highest quality muscle, or if they even know or what that means. So we're going to just offer some quotes and some definitions and stuff, because as I've marched through middle age, I can tell you I have to think about this stuff. And I know we have some listeners that are not just 22 years old. Even if you are, you know what? These are things, prevention kinds of things. Anyway, so I just pulled up a couple of papers. These aren't brand new, but it's on topic with what I've been seeing this week. So this one's from Journal of Cell Physiology 2015. Determinants of muscle and bone aging. So it says, in the context of muscle aging, it's important to remember that it's not just a decline in muscle mass which contributes to the deterioration of muscle function. Other factors underpinning muscle quality come into play, including muscle composition, aerobic capacity and metabolism, fatty infiltration, insulin resistance, fibrosis, and neural activation. Now, I know, just as a sidebar, I kind of focus on those middle three there. Like, I still do, high-intensity interval stuff. I try to focus on the aerobic capacity and I don't want insulin resistance and fatty infiltration. These are things that I can, through muscular activity and diet, I'm hoping to, manage. I have been very remiss over the years in trying to prevent this sort of, fibrosis and that kind of stuff. So if people are curious, and I know, Mike, you've done live cadaver types, fresh cadavers, and you've seen some of this stuff with your own eyes, but here's a paper defining some of the fibrosis thing. This is from Mahdy, M-A-H-D-Y, Cell Tissue Research in 2019. Excessive accumulation of extracellular matrix components. Okay, so think about the stuff that's all around the muscle, if you will, either due to excessive production, alteration in extracellular matrix degrading activities, or a combination of both, is defined as fibrosis. Now, when my wife and I talk, we just kind of define this as, Lonnie, you're like an old steer. You'd be too chewy to eat, But skeletal muscle fibrosis impairs muscle function, negatively affects muscle regeneration after injury, and increases muscle susceptibility to re-injury. Therefore, it's considered a major cause of muscle weakness. Fibrosis of skeletal muscle is a hallmark of muscular dystrophies, but also aging and severe muscle injuries. So you don't want, as it turns out, fatty infiltrated, highly marbled, if you will, if you look at a steak, but fibrous, tough, chewy, kind of collagen and scar tissue and, scrambled tendon fibers and all this kind of stuff. And I was curious as I'm looking at this stuff, because they're really redefining how we look at this stuff. When we say quality, both on a content level, but also on a function level, like how have you guys addressed that? Like Phil, I mean, you talked about going through a crazy phase when you were early, where you just push it and just do 100 sets of crazy stuff and not be able to move the next day. I know exactly what you mean. Did you ever think about like the quality of muscle you were building? I mean, in bodybuilding, muscle quality is more of a visual thing. Like, oh, that guy looks really hard and grainy or full, you know what I mean, as opposed to like flat, stringy or whatever. But how have you addressed this when you were young or now, or do you care?
Oh, back then I didn't care at all. I didn't. I just wanted muscle and I wanted strength. And also, I think that early time, like we've talked about, I think that's more about like learning your limits than it is anything else. Like that type of training is more about learning what your giving 100% is, because we see it with people, like they think they're trying hard, but they're not. I see that with my football players on the field. Like they're starting to get the mental game of training hard. Like it's going to suck if you just think it's going to suck. Yeah, and the minute we change their mindset a little, like you just got to do it. Just shut up and do it. And then they're, oh, okay. And they're like, that wasn't so bad. Yeah, because if you think it sucks, it just sucks. But early on, it was just about learning the limits. You got to learn where failure is if you want to be able to push to 90%, like true failure. But I didn't think about muscle quality. I wasn't worried if my frickin', my front delt was in the same realm as my everything else. I just needed work. I just thought about working hard. That's it. And gaining muscle.
Did you ever feel bound up or anything? Like at what point in your career you're like, is it stiffness? Or you start wondering.
Yeah, I think I did think about that. And it was when I took up powerlifting, because oddly enough, when I started lifting, I could do the full on splits. Like I was mobile.
Yeah.
I could reach over and put both my hands in my other armpits and all kinds of and I thought about it in that way, but I honestly thought about it due to powerlifting in the opposite way of most people. I had to tighten myself up. Like I could sit on my heels, and it was a bit of a detriment to the sport that I decided I wanted to choose. So I purposely bound myself up over time. And made myself tighter, and it hurt me in other aspects, but I knew it was going to do that. And that was one of those things where it's like, you got to ID the negatives and the positives and be okay with that. And I knew that if I tightened myself up, I would be better at powerlifting. To the point, I mean, I tightened myself up, as we talked about on the show, to the point where like I would miss a 600-pound squat because I didn't get depth. And I was like, add another plate. I'm good.
Yeah, push me down.
Yeah, and I just needed enough weight to get me down. Because I wanted to do powerlifting by the defined set of rules. It's like, I don't care if I could squat low. I care about how much I move, and I want to be able to just hit the edge and come up.
If you cared about it, though, do you think you could have maintained that mobility while you were getting stronger? And I mean, maybe not gotten strong. That's probably like maybe the caveat. But let's say you could have. Do you think you could have maintained that mobility while building your strength up to where you did?
God, probably. I just think it would have taken more time.
Yeah.
And like everybody else, I want it as fast as I can. And then I don't know. It's also, you go along the lines of, you follow like what I always tell everybody. Everybody looks at outliers, and I tell them, don't follow outliers. Look at 50 people that have made it to high level, find out what they have in common, and follow that. Because you're generally, if you're a freak and an outlier, you'll know it. Yeah. And most big, strong, 270-plus powerlifters that I knew weren't very mobile and couldn't do the splits, and they walked like Frankenstein. So I was like, okay, I'm going to follow that. I'm going to follow that. That's the script. Now, I could have been an outlier and potentially, and I think I probably went a little overboard on some things. But hell, I have no regrets. It got me where I was, and now I'm gaining a lot of that back, which is we can talk about here in a bit, like how my training's changed. I'm definitely thinking about mobility a lot more. I've gained a lot of mobility back, and I'll tell you what I've lost that I've noticed in the last 5 years as I'm getting to later 40s. explosiveness,
Mhm.
like is going quickly. Like I can still lift heavy weights, but it's much slower than it used to be. And so I've purposely trained, and I think that's why, hell, I'm throwing and stuff. Like I like throwing, of course, and I compete in it, but I'm doing that stuff 2 to 3 times a week now, just to do athletic, mobile things aside from just lifting. 2 feet on ground, stand up, sit down. I'm purposely doing things that have me being, for the lack of better terms, more athletic, because I saw a drastic decrease in that ability. So
Right,
I was like, okay, I need to do this stuff. I need to move around fast, and like the boxing and things. And it sucked for the first month. But you start gaining that back, and that's what I needed.
That's funny you say that, Phil. Just this past week, I was doing speed work in the gym, both like reflexive benching or like pause and go kinds of just trying to work on just the rate of force development, like a dragster. How quickly can I punch up that lighter weight?
Yeah.
Because I just felt like I was just getting slower and slower, because as a tissue assassin, all I've ever tried to do is just cause a lot of damage, let it rebuild. And like you, I was very flexible. I mean, because of martial arts and all that when I was younger, I could drop into a split front, right, left, didn't even have to warm up, not so.
Oh, yeah, and I had a great vertical. I remember I was down at Ripto's place when they tested me because he thought I would have a shit vertical because I was down there. I was at like 280, and I surprised him. I don't remember what I hit. It was 30-something inches on a vertical jump at 280. He's like, holy crap, you're a lot more explosive than I thought you were. And
because you train it.
Yeah, and it's because I trained it. I always trained fast, and that's something I stole from Ed Cohn. Was like he's like, somebody asked him if he trained speed work. He's like, yeah, every rep. Basically, he didn't have a dedicated day. He's like, every time I'm touching the ball, I'm looking to move it fast. So, and that's definitely a strength sports side of things.
It's funny the biases that each one of us will have because. For me, it was very like nutrition metabolism, like I don't want a bunch of fatty buildup. I don't want insulin resistance. How can I address that? Exercise too. But I didn't really think much about the neural stuff other than like trying to reclaim some speed work and doing that over the years. And, because I was reading papers that if you train it, you do in fact get better. If all you do is bench, if you're strong, what's that phrase you used to say it, Phil? Like what do they call the guy with the biggest bench that he does it slowly or whatever? And it's bench warmer. Because he can't generate power. Yeah. And that kind of stuff. But when I was thinking about what we were saying about how the meat looks different in grass-fed animals, it's red. It's just literally the composition is different, like this is saying, or how nobody wants to bite into this really chewy, fibrous meat like an animal, and as human animals, muscle composition matters. So stuff like omega-3, other fat intake, whatever. But I know you have thoughts on this, Mike. What do you think about the whole quality thing, the different characteristics we were just talking about, or how do you address it for yourself or your clients?
Yeah, I mean, obviously on the nutrition side, I'm more biased to metabolic flexibility. How well can your muscle use both fat and carbohydrates, making sure you don't have too much intramuscular triglyceride storage, doesn't get too crazy. Higher protein, enough carbohydrates for your goals, fish oil, those types of things. Micronutrients, I think, are super important in that area too. Sleep makes a big difference, of course. Sleep helps everything. And then training wise, I guess as the older I've gotten, I don't know, I'm 49 right now. I don't feel old. I think I just become more specific on what it is I actually want to do. And like kind of what Phil was saying, what's the price to pay for it? So my number one goal is mostly related to kiteboarding. So most of my squats are very much full depth because if I get dropped 20 feet out of the sky, I don't want to find out if I go past parallel, some shit breaks. I'd like to hopefully think I could reduce some of that load before my ass slams into my board, hopefully. And then grip related stuff. For that, I have done, like you were saying, Lonnie, more speed work, but I had to figure out what does that actually look like. So I guess for speed work, obviously acceleration, heavy loads, that stuff is super helpful. Just athletic movements. I mean, even with kiteboarding, you're doing a lot of different movements and coordination of stuff that's different than always physically holding an implement in your hand. I think there is a benefit to just general recreation. Hell, I'm even happy people are playing pickleball now versus nothing. Although it seems like a weird sport. It's like, okay, it's better than nothing. Like, you're going in the right direction.
Yeah.
Now I do like the K-Box, which is flywheel training. The nice part I like about that is that it's a lifting based thing, but because of the flywheel, the faster you move, the flywheel is pulling you into, like, say, a bicep curl, right? The eccentric, because of the momentum the flywheel is generated, the faster you do the concentric, the more eccentric force you have on the opposite side. So it's kind of a cool way that if you're just doing a slow concentric, you don't have much eccentric. But you can change the size of the wheels, and you can change just your speed of contraction. So I like that, to kind of force myself into that safe, higher eccentric component, because that's usually where your risk of injury is going to occur.
So, Mike, let me ask you this. I mean, I know we've done shows in the past about like foam rolling and how people overdo it. But when I think about this fibrosis stuff, like that seems to define me in my mid 50s. And I should have addressed it. When would you suggest people start doing that, or without overdoing it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like in their career timeline.
Yeah, I mean, I think the caveat to all this is trying to maintain your movement quality as high as possible, which again is an open-ended discussion. I don't think a lot of soft tissue stuff does what we think it does. Like when I was doing the cadaver stuff, I took part of the TFL, and this is an old, kind of frail, 90-year-old person. This wasn't a trainer. It wasn't someone who lifted a lot, or just did not appear to. And I just, tried to rip it. Nothing. So I said, okay, I'm going to clamp a forceps on each side. Now I'm going to try to rip it. Nothing. Like, okay, so I'm going to put a cut in it. So I'm going to cause, quote unquote, an injury or an incision, and then still try to rip it. Like nothing. So I don't think with a lot of hands-on work or foam roller or implements, I don't really think you're changing the tissue quality per se from the physical amount of force, because the amount of force you need would be just crazy high. Although I do think it is a way to interact with your nervous system. So if anyone's ever done, hands-on work on people, you will definitely feel extreme tissue changes, like almost immediately sometimes. But I think that's modified via the nervous system. So most of the work I do in that area then to get higher movement quality, just the right muscle to be doing the things that it should. So for example, if you're going into hip extension, your glute max should be first, your same side hamstring should be second, your opposite QL should be third. So someone is always complaining that they're doing a kind of a squat type exercise or a glute max type exercise, and their hamstrings are always sore, or they feel tight and they never feel anything in their glutes. They may have a recruitment pattern that's a little bit goofy. So I'll use a lot of RPR, reflexive performance reset, and that's just pushing on certain parts of your body to get other muscles to work better. If you want your diaphragm to work better, you'll work on your sternum. If you want your glute max to work better, as odd as it is, you'll work on the back part of your skull. And that has to do with a neural reflex from kids. So if you ever see kids learn to crawl, first thing they'll do is once they start getting hip extension, their neck goes into extension at the same time. They pick their head up. So it turns out some of those are two-way streets where you can work on the back of your head, and it seems to help with glute max or hip extension. So that's primarily really all I do now. And then I will do some mobility stuff, but that's just kind of more or less, you could say, full range of motion, lighter weight training type stuff too.
Yeah. Yeah, the full range of motion and the stretching is something I have to start dedicating time toward that. That's all there is to it. To your point, Phil, earlier, I once read a paper, I'm sure as hell not going to quote it now, but they looked at runners and they said a certain lack of flexibility can be helpful because of like the physics of, the soft tissue and how it tugs on the bone. And in other words, you could be too flexible, right?
Yeah. Especially in sprinters.
And it would hurt performance and that kind of stuff. So I get it. Like we specialize of the components of physical fitness, strength and flexibility and, endurance and aerobic capacity, all that kind of stuff, body comp. You're going to specialize. I get it. And so sometimes you sacrifice one or the other.
Yeah. I think, it was Deion Sanders, I think is who it was, that came out really fast and like he couldn't touch his toes. And they spent a season and made him stretch, and it slowed him down.
Oh yeah, he got worse.
He got way worse.
Yeah,
his hamstrings were so tight they created a shit ton of tension. You know, and they're like, well, let's stop that. You know? So, yeah, I mean, that's the thing is IDing that. And it's like flexibility is not always good depending on what you're doing, you know?
Yeah,
And that's like
I would say career stage.
Yeah.
You know, like I need that. I'm willing to be a little less explosive or strong or whatever if I can have a full range of motion and not hurt.
Yeah, but exactly.
You know.
But that's different. That's where you're at in life.
That's where I'm at, right?
Yeah, and that's where I am too. Like I'm letting go some of that stuff. But I mean, for them at their competitive best, and it goes, we say this all the time. Like the shit that is the right thing for the average general population is a lot of times wrong for an elite athlete. You know, that's just like nutrition and stuff. I mean, it's like sometimes it's just calories. Like it's just calories, guys. Get it in. You know, be damned if you're getting heart disease. Do you want to win that gold medal?
That. Yeah. My brother used to say that, Phil. He's like, just take it in. I'm like, I don't know, you know, because, you know, bodybuilders always think about body count. He's like, just take it in.
And that's really what it is. I mean, but if you look at the highest level athletes, they're not thinking about the future. They're thinking about that award, you know. And it's just like that thing they did not long ago with the Olympic athletes. Like they had some test and it's like, if we could give you a pill that guaranteed a gold medal, but you'd die within 5 years, and like 90% of them said yes. Like they don't give a shit about the future. All they care about is that award, you know. And but I mean, I think you have to have that mentality to be the best. You have to be all in, you know. I don't think anybody's accidentally been the best in the world, you know, without just giving into it.
Yeah, because there you're competing against all the outliers and freaks.
Yeah, exactly.
I just think it's a fun debate, mass versus quality. Yeah. Jarrell, how do you look at this stuff?
My personal opinion now is like peak is the Chinese lifters in terms of like both explosive and jacked. But when I started, it wasn't like that. I was like kind of enamored with like the Bulgarians, because the first videos and stuff that I like would buy had all these like nerdy looking dudes snatching 340, and I was like, God, I thought that was like fake. I was like, there's no way. And I just thought like that as a basketball player who already doesn't like lifting weights because you're like, oh, it's going to mess everything up. At the time, early, like this is my first exposure was like that, is those weightlifters and some of the stronger guys in CrossFit at the time. So that the people who were doing like King Kong and stuff, I thought that was like just in and of itself was just cool, but because there was like a blend to it, like blend of athleticism and strength. Whereas I would see powerlifters, at least the ones at the time when you could have access to any of the stuff, they're just kind of like, to me, it seems slow and sluggish. But now that you look back at a lot of these guys, there are a lot of powerlifters who are like that big, that strong, and also still explosive. So it wasn't until later that I started picking up the point of like, oh, like muscle doesn't have to, like just look doesn't have to dictate like a bodybuilder or a sluggish athlete. But my favorite was just that, like I think actually it was a Turkish lifter. He was a world champion. He had the skinniest, noodly arms, and I mean, just dominated. And I think maybe he won 2 Olympics. I don't know, and a few world championships in there. But if you saw him on the street in like a hoodie or something, no way, this dude was a lifter at all. That was what I always thought was like the coolest, was like that, like. You know, you could tell they lift weights like a little, but it's not like they're filling out their shirts or anything like that. They just were super fast. But yeah, all basketball players, they all hate lifting weights, and they're all like admire the skinny, explosive guys. Like I was just like that in, high school. It wasn't until I saw some of those weightlifters, those Bulgarians, and some of those 90s Iron Mind videos, or 80s, 90s Iron Mind videos, that I was like, oh, kind of opened my eyes to like what lifting was. Which is why I asked Phil about the being able to maintain flexibility, because if you look at a lot of weightlifters right now, like just in their training videos, especially the women,
Mm-hmm.
they're doing like crazy stretches with weight. Like I think there's a couple girls, they always do it at, you always see them in the back at Worlds. They're doing like the straddle pancake good mornings with like 40 or 50 kilos.
Mm-hmm.
So they're straddled and just doing good mornings, which again, you know, as we got stronger, I started being like, oh, you know, stretching is kind of nonsense or whatever. I saw that and I started thinking more about like loaded stretching type positions, nothing too crazy. And I started doing a lot more stuff like that now with my clients and stuff.
Yeah. But then you're getting out of the realm of flexibility and into mobility. And
yeah,
like
just being able to stretch.
Being able to do things in elongated positions is totally
Right.
different than just being able to hit a
hold
elongated position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
what you see. Like, how often have we seen, like I've said it over and over again, it's like I've seen more risk of injury in people that are just over flexible that are weak. Because, yeah, you can hit these crazy ass positions, but the minute I put some resistance on it, something snaps. You know?
Yeah.
So it's a mix of being strong in those positions. So
Right.
Because otherwise you get contorted to an end range of motion, and you know all that soft tissue is not going to hold.
Yes.
Yeah. And, you know, I always loved actually putting tension, lots of tension on muscles in a stretched position. Like, you know, I had my own word for it, but I would do stiff leg deadlifts, which meant my knees were stiff. And it was toe touches with more and more and more weight. And it would just wreck my hamstrings, you know, or I would do even stuff like what I would call hit heads, you know, lying triceps extensions. And now I did tear my triceps. So there's that. But it caused a lot of growth, you know, putting a lot of tension on a muscle in a stretched position, you know, insofar as you can do it smart, you know. Anyway.
Lonnie, over time, doing that, like, if you have a few injuries and a few movement pattern changes, do you think that you're then potentially overloading certain segments of the muscle more because of the alteration of where that tension is kind of flowing through the muscle? Does that make sense?
Well, like with hit heads, I would do them in different ways. I would literally like touch my forehead like a classic like skull crusher. Sometimes I would take it up over my head and just to get that stretch, you know, and trying to change that stuff up. You know, in bodybuilding, it was always like, how can you hit a muscle from every possible angle? You know, even if you're not going to dramatically change the shape of a muscle, I would try to do that kind of stuff. But if that's what you mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I just think about people doing the exact same movement over and over. And like you said, doing these micro changes to it of, you know, moving it to a different even target on your head, over your head, below your head. I just think of bench press too, like changing the width of the bar by like just the width of the finger. It feels completely different. I just think as I get older, these small micro changes to accommodate how your body is feeling and movement quality may result in you building up tissue a little bit more, lack of a better word, better and globally, instead of just kind of hammering one particular area, since you don't have to be as hyper specific all the time.
Well, to me, that's free weights, you know, as opposed to like these machines. Cause I feel maybe one of the reasons I'm feeling like I feel a little smaller. I feel stiffer just cause, you know, going to Planet Fatness. It's frustrating. You know, I'm longing for the barbell, so I don't know how long I can do this because you can't really do much of those. You can do some variations, but anyway. All right, well, I appreciate everybody's input on that just because it is interesting that there's functional and neural, and there's literally like the composition, like we were saying, the fat, you know, kind of fats that you eat, and the aerobic capacity and being able to, you know, what kind of fuels you can burn and all that kind of stuff. There's a huge list of things about muscle tissue. And I think when you're young, all you want is more. At least I did. Or like you guys, just stronger, or bigger. And then you start to realize, there's a lot of stuff that you'll lose as you age. And it's worth thinking about. So, anyway. All right, let's go to break. And when we come back, Phil will share some stuff. Hey everybody, Iron Radio is back, and in an expanded way. What can you expect? Well, first, you can get it simulcast every week on the nutritionradio.org network as well as on the original podcast. It'll appear regularly on iTunes, Spotify, and all your favorite podcasting sites. We have a new Iron Radio / Nutrition Radio Facebook page as well. Please check us out. We're even backed up on YouTube. Second, please tell your friends who are longtime loyal listeners that they may see emails that share just the episode link and the show notes. This is a new thing, and we hope it will build community. Third, if you were a supporting member in the past, we may prompt you to resume through PayPal, but we will confirm each and every donor before reinstating that membership category. We'll never just restart your $4 auto payments without agreement from you. And of course, we will accept new members moving forward as well. Starting back slowly and honorably is the goal. And lastly, expect the sister show Nutrition Radio to expand into once weekly 45 to 60 minute episodes with guest co-hosts covering the same nerdy nutrition news that's been broadcast for a few months now in daily 10-minute clips. We hope that an expanded presence will get you the news, education, banter, and guests that's made Iron Radio's community so loyal from the start. You are appreciated.
All right, guys. We are back. What I want to talk about today, it's, again, like every time we talk about things, it relates to what's going on in life, in the gym, wherever. And I was working with my kids, and one thing I noticed, so we were working on tackling drills, and one thing I noticed was just how tentative they are. And it had me look back at, like, my lifting and coaching lifters, and when they fail, and most often it's when they're scared. You know, they're scared of weight. So it's like, at what point how do we train confidence in lifts? Because you see it no matter what, and that's what we were talking about before the show with, say, the best lifters in the world. Like, you just look at them before a lift, and okay, he's got this. You know, you can tell. There's a switch they turn on when it gets heavy, and same thing in myself, and that's what I'm trying to explain to the boys is, like, you need to turn it on. It's time to turn it on. And, like, you have to not be scared. You have to just do the work. You have to go mindless and just trust the process, do the work. And, you know, it's just talking about how we do that, how we train that, how do we get to that area. And part of it's just comfort and repetitions. But then there's also another level, like we were talking about before the show, that you see the elite of elite can hit. And it's like they can turn on a level under pressure. Like, most people, if they're under extreme pressure, they'll turn on something, but then they make mistakes. It's like they've overgone. You still have to stay, like, controlled under pressure somewhat. Because I just don't want my boys out there on the field like, okay, just go 1,000%, and they're fucking running the wrong way. You know, you have to stay mindful. So, and, like, related back to training, it's like we talked about, like, what I always did under training is, like, we trained in my gym to always win. Like, I want no misses in training, because I noticed there was that run in time where I had, like, 4.5 years where I never missed a deadlift rep. Not one time. Like, I never trained to failure. I never missed a rep in training. I never missed. And then I finally missed. You know, like, I pulled 780 and then I missed 800, and I was fucking shocked because I had no doubt. And that's what you have to have, like, in sport, in lifting. Like, the minute you let doubt enter your mind, most of the time you've already lost. Like, if I line one of my boys up against a bigger boy and he's like, oh shit, I'm going to get killed. Guess what's going to happen? You're going to move slow, you're going to move tentative, and you're going to get killed most of the time. Or if I load a bar for Mike, and say, okay, Mike, you're going to squat this. And he's like, you're fucking crazy, Phil. I don't have this shit. Guess what's going to happen? He doesn't have this shit. You know? So it's like, how do we train that? Is it just through positive repetitions? Are there people that just don't have that button to turn on? Like, if you look at the greatest, I mean, and that's like, I mean, in football, they say, like, one of the famous coaches out there, he's like, with offensive linemen, I want scholars. With defensive linemen, I want kids that came from a broken home and lived in an inner city and, like, dodge bullets. Yeah, you know, because he wants just pissed off fuckers. How do you teach somebody to turn that switch on? And is it just positive repetitions? Is it? That's the biggest thing we're battling right now. say, on the practice field, is just learning that go button. And now we had one kid, he's one of the smallest kids on the team, and he'd just sell out. He's just running and just goes airborne, and he lays the biggest hits that he can for a 43-pound kid. But and then our biggest boys are coming up and playing patty cake, you know. And it's just an interesting thing. It's the mental side of the game. You know, it's a mental confidence, and also it goes beyond that. It's just and that's what I was trying to explain to my son, is just, you got to turn it on. You got to turn it on, and just the give a shit, the care. I don't know. It's almost the care about your own self-preservation has to turn off. And that's in lifting too, in lifting sports. Like, I can't come up to when I squatted 778, I wasn't worried, you know. Now, do I know in the back of my head that, man, if something goes wrong, I'm screwed? Yeah, I knew that. But in that time, I have to turn that off and just be 100% confident in what I'm going to do. Like, if I just go through this motion, and if I just do this right, I'm coming out good and I'm going to win. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on training for that? How do you guys train athletes for that?
Question for you, Phil, about that, just in general, but do you think that has anything or a lot to do with kids not just kind of wrestling and playing around as much? Like, there's just a lot less physicality in terms of like what's allowed and what's not.
100%. And that's what we've talked about with my wife and other coaches on the field. Like, in today's society, boys aren't allowed to be boys. And it's true. Like, they're always told, you need to settle down. You need to, no, they need to go out and beat the shit out of each other. They need that outlet. And like, a lot of our boys have been browbeaten and told to settle down and this and that. So they get on the field and they're being gentle. It's like, no, this is your spot. You can do that here. This is okay. And it's given that outlet. And we can see it. And I think we got 3 kids on the team that have been wrestlers. You can see a drastic difference because they've had that. And that's like Odin. That's what I related to him, because he got his ass kicked in wrestling. But then I told him, okay, you just need to go out this match and just be aggressive. And he mopped the floor with the kid just by being aggressive. And it's like, sometimes that's all you need. And at this level of football, like, we're not doing stunts and crazy. Nobody's doing it. You know, we don't have some crazy, Andy Reid offense going on out there with movement going all over the place. It's literally just effort can win. You know? And that's all we need. And I mean, look at Windler's teams. Windler's teams win. They run a wing T offense. They advertise what we're going to do. Like, hey guys, we're running up the middle 47 times. Just beat us. And it's just effort based. It's effort and strength based. And that can get you a long way. So yeah, I think part of it is definitely that.
Phil, it might be generational. This is serendipity that I saw this past week, but there was a psychologist, Mike, you might know his name. He does a lot of TED Talks and everything. And he talks about, like, in 1995 and moving forward, we built this fragile generation where people would say, hey, he said, always run to the teacher, like, always, use your words. And I'm not saying use your fists necessarily, but hey, teacher, he said something rude to me, or, they didn't have as much interaction. They didn't take risks. They didn't get to go out and, take the bus by themselves or whatever it is. They were highly protected, and now they can't turn it on. And to your point, sports should be that. This is like the sociology of sport class. That's where you get to be the warrior.
It's a contrived situation under rules. Like, football is a violent sport. And if you're not being violent, and that's what I've seen, like, the person who's not being violent and not going 100% is usually the one that gets hurt. Because they're out there playing with, I got 9 kids that are going hard and 2 that aren't. What happens if one of those 9 kids that are going hard hit one of the kids that's being tentative? It usually ends bad.
That's usually how you make the varsity right there.
Yeah.
Catch that kid sleeping out there.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where you get these big hits, and like, it's just usually if you have 2 people going 100% against each other in an Oklahoma drill or something, it ends up okay. There's a big hit and they're both fine. One kid's scared, and he looks like that guy on Waterboy. He's like, oh, and he just gets murdered. And Yeah, I don't know. It's a different.
I don't want to say this is more related to adults because actually kids. So like this little 6-year-old that he did his first meet last week, but he doesn't have that like whatever that handbrake is. He doesn't have that on, so he'll get in a little zone. It's kind of funny, but so I don't think it like you start with that. But after doing jujitsu for a while and then having adults come in and like how careful they are. And like you can tell some guys are more with it. A lot of these guys are, ex wrestlers and stuff. And so the physicality is a lot different there. But they start to learn who they can be more physical with versus others and so on and so forth. But it's kind of one of those things where they just haven't had any aspect to physicality. And they in their mind I think everything everything is going to get them hurt or injured.
Yeah.
Whereas a way lower percentage of what people think will get them hurt or injured gets them injured. And usually that's like, for most people, it's like what you do consistently. Like you usually do something consistently stupid, and then that's what leads to a bad injury. Not like doing something like stupid all at once. Like usually like, you can skate away from that a lot of times, but just, rolling with people and seeing how careful they are. In terms of, there are like guys that are smaller than me and like all that, and then they like, do some weird, goofy white belt thing, and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, did I?" Like, dude, you can't hurt me. Like, you're gonna be fine, man. Like, unless you poke me in the eye or something, you're gonna be all right. Just go, like, actually apply pressure. Like, be, more aggressive. Yeah. So you tell they've kind of grown up in this aspect of not giving like 100% and like staying within the parameters of safety or comfort. I don't know which one it is.
Well, and I think part of it is becoming comfortable in unsafe environments. Meaning, like if I look back over my career of lifting, any big lift I made, like you can just tell somebody to get jacked up. The problem with that is now they're thinking about getting jacked up. Like when I was lifting heavy or in any athletics I've done where I did great, I wasn't thinking about that. I was jacked up, but like I wasn't thinking about a 780 squat. Like I wasn't concentrating. Okay, you got this. No, I was just doing it. It's more going mindless than anything. And reacting.
Flow, like a state of flow.
Yes, you just go mindless. And I think that's also what happens in any sport. It's just it's time to rely on the training. You know this. Now just act. And it's going like I've talked about it on the show in tennis. Like if somebody hacks, if you go against, I don't know any tennis players. Andre Agassi, I'm aging myself. Hits a serve at you. And if you actually think about, okay, it's going to the right, and like it's gone. You have to just react. You have to get in a state of mindlessness and aggression where you're just reacting. And I think that's what the best do when they turn it on. Like if you turn it on and you're actively trying to be aggressive, you're kind of overthinking. You're thinking too much. Like athletics, especially team sports, athletics when you're going against other people, like there's no time for thinking. The minute I'm thinking, if I'm trying to tackle somebody, he jukes me and I think, oh, he's going left now. It's too late. He's gone. You just have to react and get this mindless state. And that's where I think, like with a lot of these boys in my football team, it's more just going to be reps. It's going to be reps to reach that point of being able to go mindless and just turn it on. Just be aggressive, but you have enough reps in that you can be aggressive and not have to think because you've got enough reps under your belt. That your brain automatically IDs, oh, he's about to cut left because his foot went that way. Boom,
right.
Yeah. And I don't think we can shortcut that. Now, can we get them to at least sell out and tackle a dummy? Yeah. If they can't tackle a pad without patty caking it, then we're in trouble. And that's
Phil, the old man wisdom for me is the way you achieve this stuff is through practice. You got to get in the reps. Like I love weightlifting metaphors. Get in the reps, and you know what I mean. Like in the martial arts, there's this concept zanshin, which is just exactly what you're saying. No mind, reflex. The motor patterns are there. you rely on your training. You're not worrying about everything. Yes, it's about technique. It's focus. And it's almost the opposite of like what I've seen some people when they overdo caffeine. Do they have the aggression? Yeah, they go in the gym and they spaz out and hurt themselves, or no, and that's not what we're talking about. And I think the only way you do that is through lots and lots of repetition and repetition.
Yeah, to where you can just not think about it, and that's
so you can use
throwing.
it.
Yeah, that's in my throwing. Like I'm still at that point, and I used to be better when I competed a lot. I went through hundreds of slower repetitions, worrying about nothing but doing it right. And I got to the point where that's all I knew. So when I went hard, I threw it right. Now, coming back to say hammer, I'm throwing 25 feet less than I used to. It's because the minute I go hard, I move wrong. If that makes sense. It's like my hardest throws go shorter. Like, whereas my lighter throws, when I just concentrate on throwing it right, go further. I need those repetitions in to where right is my default. And I don't think that there's not a way around that besides tons of repetitions. You have to get yourself to the point where right is the default. And that's the same thing in like plays where we're working with the boys. Like, okay, we're going to walk through this play. Now we're going to go through the play at 25%. Now we're going to go at 70%. Now let's see if we can do it right at 100% speed. Like if they can't do it right at 50%, how the fuck are they going to do it right at 100? So, and that's, like you said, I think a lot of it's just repetition. And then, like we talked about before the show, there are some freaks out there that just thrive under high stress situations and can stay mindless and react. But that's the freak of the freaks.
Yeah, and those people have accumulated thousands upon thousands of reps even to get to that state.
Yeah. Sometimes I think intelligence is a curse because you run through all these. It's harder to quiet your mind.
Yep.
Like people who are introverts, they have a lot going on between their ears all the time, and it's harder to quiet that internal dialogue and stuff. But honestly, I think that's why the gym is so helpful, because you do get all those reps. And not just burning in motor patterns, but the confidence, psychological confidence, can only come, in my opinion, either from stupidity, that's more foolhardy, or from experience. Experience breeds confidence. And then it's that look that you talked about when some guy walks up to the bar, his eyes are kind of, you can see it in his eyes. I don't know, or her eyes.
Yep.
She's just like,
and the way they carry themselves.
Everybody knows they've got this.
Yep.
And that's the kind of confidence that comes with lots of experience.
Yeah, and then there's how do you handle that? And that's what I was talking about with his son. He's like, do I need to yell and scream? I was like, I don't know. I don't know what that zone looks like for you. No, we've all seen it. There are some lifters that are loud. And like when they're in that zone, they're screaming and yelling. And there's others that are just stoic as hell, but they're in that zone. I was like, you're going to find that what's right for you. My only goal for him was, like, he was talking trash last week. All of a sudden he hit the zone and he's telling this kid how much he sucks. And I was like, that's awesome. My only rule for you is don't go out there and trash talk unless you're ready to cash that check. I was like, don't be the kid that trash talks and then gets ruined.
So Lonnie touched on something there that, I was going to bring it up. I didn't have a phrasing for it at some point, and we could talk about this more in depth in another show. Just in the introvert, extrovert, I would just say like kind of personality traits in terms of like truly what personality traits can lead to high level performance. But it's like there's a lot of, and you look at every realm of things. It's like there's a lot of people who can do really good, like are really good football players, really good basketball players who are more extroverted, essentially. But like the true, I would just call them like psychopaths of any sport who are usually like introverted because they always do all this stuff on their own. And they're going through, there's like an obsession and then an internal like dialogue of, and maybe they suck at first, right? Like they're like, God, but they're figuring it out. Like they're watching things and they're figuring it out. They're constantly running through it, and I can't speak to it fully because I'm not sure, but the things that like Kobe Bryant and like Michael Jordan, the stuff that they say to me seems more like they're, essentially introverted. So they're constantly running through, okay, and they'll end up being a little bit more innovative in sport where they kind of figure out these little, hacks or whatever. And so I wonder about that with team sports and like the kids who maybe are a little bit more thought heavy now and like, but they just stay obsessed with it and they just keep kind of coming back to it and like where it goes in the long term or if that has any effect or if you notice anything, particularly Phil, because you have a whole gaggle of kids, doing stuff.
Oh, I think in time, yeah, it is the smarter kids I think that end up better in the long term than the ones that are just all go. Like, because in the end, a team sport is a lot of thought. Like at our level, like I said, at our level of football, it's just effort. It's just, there's not a lot of thought going on. But, and that's one thing the boys are learning is how complex this game is. Like all the rules, all the different formations, and like at some point you have to think, because if my linebacker overreacts and then there's a reverse, like everybody just ran to the whole team bit on that fake to the left, and now there's nobody left to the right. So you have to stay disciplined as well. There's a discipline in it, and know your role. This is my place, and you're not wrong by staying there, even if that play's going that way. So yeah, I'm thinking time, and I think as you guys talked about, a lot of the freaks out there in athletics, in combat, and like I've been lucky enough to meet and train with a bunch of Navy SEALs, and on the street, the average person be like, dude, I would whoop his ass.
Yeah.
And then they turn it on and you are ruined in 6 seconds. Yeah. And part of that's skill and part of that's mentality, and so yeah, it's a different situation. I think a lot of it can be trained, but then I think there are people that are just like they're genetic freaks, they're mental freaks, and they process things so quickly that they excel.
Yeah, the best motor learning, I guess, theory for it, I still like Maslow's theory, which is basically the 4 stages. So the top stage is that you are unconsciously competent, right? So the flow state, you're literally just reacting, but you have to react correctly. But we know unconscious movement, thought, behavior is much faster than conscious. The step before that is conscious competence. So how do you make somebody do the right thing, even if they do have to think about it for a while? You can speed through a lot of the stages, but I think that conscious, competent stage, there's no way of getting around just a massive amount of reps to make it more unconscious. I thought a lot about, is there any way you can speed through that? And I'm not sure. I mean, the only thing I've ever come up with is that the better functioning your body is in movement, proprioception, where everything is, maybe that offloads, quote unquote, part of your brain to speed through that process. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you do see, watching high level athletes operate, they're operating at an unconscious, competent level.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of this goes back to what we always preach as coaches, is that failure is not a bad thing if you look at it as a learning experience.
Right, it's just feedback.
You'll see what the best do. They don't get upset over failure. They process it and learn from it. Like, oh, he did that move on me. He got me. Okay, what did he do? What did it look like? And now they know that, and you'll see them, like the next time somebody tries that on them, they know what's going to happen, and they unconsciously change. So it's part of that is looking at, you got to get kids, you got to get young athletes to identify that failure is not, like, it's going to happen. It's inevitable. Learn from it. Don't look at it as a bad thing. Just get pissed off. Like, process what happened and don't let it happen again.
I have a little phrase I call fail forward as fast as possible.
Yeah.
So you're going to fail, and that's just part of learning. But as long as you learn from it, like you said, you incorporate that into the next thing. So then you can get closer, paradoxically, to the next failure to get you closer to the next.
Yep. So, no, that's a fun topic. But,
yeah.
All right, guys. Guess we're done.
All right. We'll talk to you next week.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community.
The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.